Hello again. In this video, I'm going to show you how to play against the Fianchetto system against the KID. So after the moves d4, d6, knight f3, knight f6, c4, g6. Here we're going to see the Fianchetto system with g3. And also, I can first play knight c3 and then go for the Fianchetto. So knight c3 first will be the lines where white includes knight c3 and goes g3, and g3 first will be the lines where white is delaying to put the knight on c3. So g3, this is the Fianchetto system against the King's Indian. It's a very solid system because white is Fianchettoing the bishop, and his king will be safe. White is claiming to have slightly more space due to the pawns on c4 and d4. At the same time, this system is very popular, so you're likely to meet this in practice. So you need to be prepared. Bishop g7, bishop g2. And here we are recommending the system with bishop f5. This is a good move, but is not so well known and not so often seen in practice. So you can also surprise your opponent with this. It's a very logical move, developing the bishop, and the main point is that if white goes knight c3, we have knight e4 to trade a pair of knights and at the same time open up the g7 bishop. Also, if white goes knight h4 with a double attack on the bishop and on b7 pawn, we can go bishop e4 and annihilate the light squared bishop. So now there is a logical question: why not first castle and then go bishop f5? This has a drawback because if white goes knight c3, bishop f5, of course there are other moves here, but let's say we try to go for the same idea, and then white goes knight h4 with this double attack on f5 and b7. We need to fall back with the bishop to c8, and now white can either repeat the moves with knight f3, but there is also e4, and we need to find another strategy here. We cannot play bishop f5 anymore. So because of this, we go bishop f5 straight away before white has time to play knight c3. And here we're going to see queen b3, knight h4, and castle. Of course, one of the main moves is knight c3, but we can play knight e4 and it will transpose to some lines we're going to see afterwards. So let's start with queen b3, a move which makes a lot of sense. After we played bishop f5, the b7 pawn is weak, and this move points this out. White is immediately attacking our pawn on b7. We don't have very good way to defend it. We don't really want to play b6 because then we weaken the light squares on the queen side. That's why we go queen c8, defending on b7. And at the same time, we are still able to, after knight h4, to go bishop e4 and to stop white's double attack. Now the white's most logical move is knight c3, renewing the threat of knight h4, because now the e4 square is under control. And here I like this move, knight c6. This is the knight is active here. We're stopping knight h4 because d4 pawn is hanging. And at the same time, now b7 pawn is covered. There's also another option to go c6 here, just to close the long diagonal. And after castle, to jump knight e4. Of course, this is also possible, but it's a bit more passive, and white is slightly better, probably. So we go knight c6. And now white's most ambitious move, and of course it comes with tempo, is d5 to hit this knight. And there is a point in it. We don't have good squares for the knight, so we need to make a concession. We need to get either to d8 and b8. Each of these moves has its own drawbacks. We chose knight d8 because it defends the pawn on b7, and also because it was played by Anish Giri, so it has its approval, his approval. Knight b8 is also possible, and then after knight d4, the bishop falls back to d7. So that can also be considered, but let's stick to knight d8. Well, the knight is misplaced here, but of course, on a longer term, we're going to improve its position. And castle, just natural moves. Both sides are bringing the kings to safety. And now rook e1. White is preparing e4. We are stopping this, of course, with knight e4. The well-known idea, we are opening up the g7 bishop. And here we still need to find a way to bring this knight on d8 into play. But once we manage to do that, black is really fine. And this was the game Danchenko-Giri, played in Vaikense 2024. And you can find it in the Model Games chapter. Let's go back. And there is knight h4. Of course, we need to consider all these moves with tempo. This was tried sometimes. There is a double attack on the bishop and the b7 pawn. Of course, we go bishop e4. And now we want to trade the strong bishop on g2. If we manage to do that, we are really happy. And here we're going to consider f3 or even knight f3 back. If white allows us the bishop trade, for example, after castle, we just trade the bishops, or knight c3, trade the bishops, or bishop e4, knight e4, trade the bishops. We're happy to trade the bishops, obviously, because white is counting on this light squared bishop to put long-term pressure on our position, and also is defending the king. Once we trade it, we are we'll have a comfortable position. So that's why white is stopping this. And there is a move knight f3, inviting for a move repetition or not. Maybe white can change his mind. And here, of course, we can repeat the moves with bishop f5. Okay, I just want to mention that after this move knight f3, white wants to go knight c3 and hit this bishop. So that is the thing. And then if we go back to f5, then knight h4, e4 is not available, and bishop has to go back to c8 and so on. So this is what is aiming for. Here, if we want to avoid the move repetition, we can go c6 just to cover this long diagonal. Knight c3, this was the idea. Castle, castle, and knight bd7, bringing the last piece into play. We're going to give up the light squared bishop. Sooner or later, white will have to take it, but then we'll get a strong knight in the center. We'll be able to support this knight with f5, let's say, and maybe afterwards we can even push e5. Another useful move here, especially if white goes for some b3 ideas, is to push a5 just to gain some more space on the queen side. And okay, white has the bishop pair, or not yet, but white will get the bishop pair, but we have a very solid position. And there is a lot of fight ahead, and I think black is fine here. Then there is f3. This looks like a concession because it shuts off this g2 bishop, and also the knight on h4 is without perspectives. But on the other hand, this comes with tempo, and now we need to do something about the bishop. We can go bishop c6, but I like more bishop takes b1. This is more straightforward. Rook b1, castle. Also very natural moves. I like it when it's enough to just play natural moves and get a great position. So that's what we're doing. c5 is also good here, but it is more forced, and white can go for an endgame after d takes c5, where black is fine, of course, but we don't need to get into some forced lines when we can just castle. Now, if white castles, this will transpose to a line we're going to see later on. So here, let's say f4 move, which makes a lot of sense to open up the g2 bishop. Already white has a threat. We need to counter the bishop on the long diagonal with c6. And now black's idea is to go knight bd7, followed by either e5 to open the position, or even a5. And this happened in the game Kolimar against Leon, played in AICA 2024. Black went on to win convincingly, and you can find the game in the Model Games chapter. And now let's see castle. This is the most often played move. And of course, it's also the most flexible. White just finishes the development, and then he's going to decide how to proceed. We also castle. And here we have many moves to cover. Again, there is queen b3. There is knight c3, there is b3, and finally the ambitious knight h4. So let's see them one by one. Queen b3. This will most likely transposed to queen b3 the previous move with the Donchenko-Giri game. The idea is the same. White is attacking the b7 pawn because we played bishop f5. Here, compared to queen b3 without castles, we have some additional options. But let's say we just continue with queen c8, defending the b7 pawn. There is a funny alternative here, I have to mention, but just when in this position where castles are included, because now there is knight c6, and after queen b7, the move a5. Of course, this is computer approved. Queen c6 and then bishop d7. This leads to a move repetition. The queen has nowhere to go. So if you want to, if you're fine with a draw, you can go for this. Or maybe white is afraid to take on b7. That is also fine. But let's stick to this very natural plan, queen c8. Knight c3. Again, white's threat is to go knight h4, since we don't have bishop e4 available. White has this knight on c3 now. Knight c6, we're developing, we're covering the b7 pawn. And also, we keep an eye on this d4 pawn. White goes d5, the ambitious move, and again, knight d8. This transposes to the game Donchenko-Giri that we've seen before. Again, here, knight b8 is possible as well. And then we can go knight b7 to reroute this knight, or knight a6. Anyway, we want to bring the knight to c5. This is also possible. Now let's see knight c3, very logical move. Now here we're going to see only the differences compared to the line where both sides, neither side castled. So because there are some subtle differences. Of course, we have to go knight e4. This is our idea. We go for it. And here, most of the moves like knight d5, knight h4 are going to transpose to the lines where the castles are not included, but they will be played afterwards. So these moves make no difference. That's why we're going to see knight b1. So here there is a difference, because if we go c6, we're not threatening the check on a5. And of course, here we can repeat the moves with knight f6 if we want to, or at least we can do this once. But there is an interesting way to keep the game alive with e5. And now white has to do something about this break in the center. White takes on e5. The idea is that if we take, then to go knight h4. And here I like this idea, knight c6. We just sacrifice the pawn, and now we continue the development. And if white takes on d6, then we have queen d6, and black gets a huge compensation because all the pieces are very active. And white goes knight h4 to attack this bishop on f5. Here we take d takes e5. We're taking the pawn back, but now white has a chance to try to win a piece. And we're going to see queen d8 and knight takes f5. The idea of this move, of course, it's a concession because it gives us control over the d file. But the point is that now the knight on h4 is not attacked anymore, and afterwards white wants to proceed with the g4. So we take rook d8. Of course, the rook on f8 may be more useful there. And g4, this is the idea. White is winning a piece. There is no way to save the piece. But as you can see, we have much better development, and we're going to get great compensation if we react correctly. Bishop takes g4 is good to take back some material. Bishop e4. Now white is happy, and if he has time to consolidate, is just winning. But we have this move knight d4. It's good to remember this precise move. And okay, we have a pawn, but we're going to take back some material, and suddenly black has many threats because of the active position, active pieces, and lead in development. And here black has enough compensation for the piece. So this is queen d8, but you need to know this. And then there is knight takes f5. This is the strategical line. White is just grabbing the bishop pair. We take back, g takes f5, knight d2. The idea is to open up this light squared bishop. And here we want to keep more pieces on the board. That's why we play knight c5. Knight b3. White is insisting to trade the knights. And here we go knight e6. We have active pieces. And we want to go e4 to shut off the light squared bishop, open up our own bishop. And the position is quite unusual here, but black is doing fine. There's b3. Quite a slow move. White is preparing bishop b2 with double fianchetto. And when white goes for the b3, for this b3, we are inspired to push a5 to gain some space on the queen side, and sometimes just annoy him with a4. Bishop b2 and c6 is a useful move to shut off the light squared bishop on the long term. Now, sooner or later, white has to go knight c3, and we go knight e4. And we achieved our idea to open up the g7 bishop and trade the pair of knights. And here black has a solid position. Probably the game is about equal, but plenty of fight ahead. Of course, white can try to play knight h4, and this is the most ambitious approach to this double attack on the f5 bishop and b7 pawn. We go bishop e4. We want to trade the bishops because the g2 bishop is white's best piece here. And of course, white doesn't want to allow this bishop trade, and we're going to consider here Knight f3, f3, and bishop h3 even. Knight f3, white is fine with the repetition so far, but later on may change his mind. Of course, here we can go bishop f5. By the way, white wants to go now knight c3, attacking our bishop, and if we go back to f5, then knight h4, and we don't have bishop e4 anymore. So here we can go bishop f5 or just continue with knight bd7. Knight e3, this is white's idea to take our bishop pair. c6. You see, whenever we give up the light squared bishop, we need to close the long diagonal by playing c6. White has to take the bishop sooner or later, 94, 94. And now there are plenty of options for white. One of them would be knight d2 to get rid of the knight on e4. We're fine to trade the knights. Queen d2 needs to defend the d4 pawn. And here, e5 is again a good move. Just to seize some space on the queen side, we can this pawn can travel even further to a4, or there are ideas to go queen b6 here, attacking the d4 pawn. Again, here black has active pieces. We don't have the bishop pair. You cannot have everything. And it's a playable position. Some long fight ahead, and I don't see how white can make use of the bishop pair. Bishop h3 is another way to avoid the bishop trade. White is preparing knight c3, and then to hunt down our bishop. And here we can strike in the center immediately with e5, since white's pieces are quite misplaced on the edge of the board, and the others are not developed. In some games, black played bishop c6, which is also fine. But let's see, e5, d5, white is trying to trap our bishop in the center of the board. We need to find a way out for the bishop. There is no way out, so we're going to trade it. Bishop b1, rook b1, and now a5. With this move, we want to secure the c5 square for the knight. We can bring it there via a6, c5, or d7, c5, as you like it. White's pieces are discoordinated here. You can see them on the edge of the board. And after we bring the knight to c5, we want to push e4 to open up our bishop and so on. Again, there is f3, which is a strategical concession, but it comes with tempo, and now we need to take a decision about the bishop. Also, later on, white can push f4, and he will reactivate the bishop on g2. Here we take on b1, rook b1, and c5. We're striking in the center at once before white has time to activate his pieces. And here we're going to see d takes c5 and f4. D takes c5, clearing the situation in the center and going for an endgame with a bishop pair. We take. queen d8. If white doesn't take, then we just go queen b6, knight c6, bring a rook to d8, and black enjoys a great position. So white takes f4 to open up the light squared bishop. If white goes bishop e3 here to attack on c5, we just go knight a6 and defend the pawn. So f4, knight c6. Of course, the knight is well placed here. We don't mind if white takes on c6 and doubles our pawns, because then we'll have good control over e4 square. So white should probably go bishop e3 to target the c5 pawn. Now there is knight d4. And black has a good endgame here. We're attacking on e2, so if white takes on b7, we can just take on e2 and then rook b8 with a good position. Yeah, here we've seen d takes e5. I want to mention also this move d5, which looks weird with the knight on h4, pawn on f3. And here black gets very good play with b5, cb5, and then a6 with a nice compensation, because I think white's pieces are misplaced here. In the meantime, we're opening up the A file and B file to get Benko-like compensation, but with the white knight stranded on h4, bishop on g2 shut off, this weak diagonal. So really great position for black. f4, white is counter-attacking and is attacking the b7 pawn, also freeing up the f3 square for the knight. And in some lines, white just wants to push f5 to open up the f file. Now there is no good way to defend the pawn on b7. We're going to play knight bd7. And okay, white can go e3. We're going to see that, but of course we need to consider bishop takes b7, rook b8, bishop f3. And now we can take on d4. White has to take with the queen. Queen takes a5. Okay, a2 is under attack. This knight is on h4, misplaced. The queen is also misplaced because we could move the knight somewhere, attack the queen. We can bring the other rook to f8. So this looks like great compensation for black. That's why white, let's say white goes e3 in order to recapture on d4 with the pawn. And now we can finally defend the pawn. And we want to take on d4. If white takes with the pawn, then grab the c4 pawn. White may as well defend the c4 pawn with b3. And now we have this useful move e6. Afterwards, we always have ideas to push d5. We're stopping white from pushing f5 anyway. And we have plenty of useful moves. First of all, we can bring the rooks on the open files, like rook ac8, rook fd8. C takes d4 is there as well. And of course, at the right moment, we can push d5. And now let's see the lines where white includes knight c3, bishop g7, And in this chapter, we're going to see the lines with G3. So for other option, check the other chapters. So white is going for the Fianchetto system. Very solid system, very popular. But in this situation, the knight is included on C3. And we go for, again, for this rare sideline, but a good sideline with bishop f5. The idea now is to just go knight e4 since the white knight is already on c3. And it's important that white doesn't have the bishop on g2, so after knight h4 only the bishop is under attack, and white doesn't have bishop on g2 to attack on b7 as well. I have to say also that this idea with bishop f5 is fully justified from a strategical point of view. Since we develop a piece, and if we manage knight e4, it's very good. And now we're going to see bishop g2 and knight h4. Knight h4, white is reacting quickly before we have time to jump to e4 with the knight. And here we are recommending this novelty, bishop e6. We are attacking the c4 pawn, and we hope to disrupt white's development. Okay, attacking on c4. Right now we cannot take on c4, but because of queen a4. But first of all, it's not our turn. And secondly, the threat is there, so white needs to consider it. And now we're going to see e4 and bishop g2. e4 is an ambitious move, getting more pawns in the center, defending the c4 pawn in advance. For now, white is not fianchettoing the bishop. We can castle, and now white cannot fianchetto because of bishop c4. White plays f4 to take control of the whole center. Look at this massive pawns in the center. However, we are not impressed because white lacks development. If h3 to prevent bishop g4, always a useful move, but again, white is not developing the pieces. Now the bishop on e6 did its job, and we can just drop it back in order to go e5, and we have a good version of the King's Indian. So let's see this f4, and now we have bishop g4 with counterplay, obviously taking advantage of the fact that white didn't play h3. And now white has to move the queen, but then the queen will be misplaced. And we can play the knight c6 or knight a6 afterwards. In some position also e5 is there. It's a new position. White has more space, but no, he's lagging in development. And here we can get very strong counterplay easily. Bishop g2. This is the most logical move, and this is most likely to happen, to be seen on the board. White is attacking on b7. Of course, we cannot take on c4 right now, so we go c6. We are defending on b7, and now we are renewing the threat to take on c4. White has to stop this somehow, so let's say b3. But now we can play d5 and take control over the center. And this is good because knight on h4 is misplaced. The knight should have fought for the e5 square, or maybe to have options to jump to g5. So white will have to spend some more time to bring it back into play. The position is about equal, but again, I have to say all the pieces are on the board, so the game has just started. So bishop g2 is the main move. And we can reach this position also from other move orders. For example, if white first of all goes g3, bishop g2, and then knight c3 instead of castling. This is the main idea, to go knight e4 before white has time to go knight h4 here. So with knight e4, we want to trade a pair of knights. We open up the g7 bishop. And here we're going to cover many moves. And knight e4, queen b3, bishop d2, knight a4. Basically, all the possible logical moves. Castle, knight b1, knight e5, and finally knight h4. So whatever move you think of, I'm going to cover it for you. First of all, let's start with knight takes e4, which makes sense because with knight e4 we wanted to take on c3 and double the pawns, so white may as well trade the knights. But this works for us because after bishop e4 we are countering this bishop on g2, and we managed to trade one pair of knights. The bishop on g7 is open now. Castle, castle, bishop e3 and b3 we're going to see here. b3, this is the second most played move in the position. White is aiming for a double fianchetto, which is usually a good idea. But here it's not good enough because it allows us to push c5 and fight for the center right away. Bishop b2, knight c6. It's always a good sign when we manage to get this knight on c6, also to put even more pressure on d4. We have a threat, of course, to take bishop f6 and then grab the pawn on d4. And white cannot really stop this. So b3 is not so good. I would prefer bishop e3 here. And here e5 is the easiest way to equalize. We want to follow up with knight c6. However, if you want to keep the position more complex, you can try knight d7. And this was played in the game Tita Sven against Leon in Mali Losin 2024. Of course, you can find this game in the model games chapter. So please take a look at it. But if you want to just reach a comfortable equal position, you go e5, d takes e5, d takes e5. And now let's say white can grab more space on the queen side with b4. And if we go knight c6, let's say to play b5, but we go knight c6 anyway. We're just in time. And the knight is heading to d4. And here black has a comfortable position. Queen b3 always has to be considered because white is putting pressure on the b7 pawn. And he's trying to punish us from playing because we played bishop f5. But we can just take on c3, and this trade is good for us, of course. B takes c3 is the move. White has to go for it. If queen c3 to keep the pawn structure intact, there is c5. Then this pin is annoying for white. And queen b7 is just bad because, well, the idea is to take the rook on a8 or the knight on c3, but we have bishop e4, and white is losing. So b takes c3 has to be played. And here, of course, we can play bishop e4. Again, we are countering the light squared bishop on g2. And after this, we get a comfortable position. We can just follow up with castle. Maybe b6 can be included as well. Knight c6, knight a5 afterwards. Just, of course, after we play b6, because we don't want to lose the b7 pawn. So queen b3 is not really challenging. Bishop d2 is an option just to develop the pieces, and now white wants to, if we take on c3, he wants to take back with the bishop. But here we can take the bishop, and now we have the bishop pair. Queen d2, castle, castle, and knight c6. We're ready to start strike in the center with e5. And black has a good position here. Okay, if white goes d5, then we can jump to e5. So this is fine. We're happy here that we managed to get the dark square bishop. Knight a4, this is a strange move. White attempts to avoid the knight trade, and of course he's threatening knight h4. But now we can go c5. We put pressure on d4, and there is a threat of queen a5. And this worked because white hasn't castled yet. There is castle, of course, very natural move, but this allows us to double the pawns. We go for it. If we castle, this would transpose, but we want to use this extra option to take on f3, on c3, bishop c3. And of course, now we need to cover the long diagonal of bishop e4. Here white can play bishop h3. This is a typical idea to move the bishop away from the long diagonal so that he can play knight g5 or knight d2. Castle, let's say knight d2. Knight g5 leads to similar play, but the knight is more exposed there because later on, not now, we can play h6 and remove the knight. So knight d2. Bishop c6. I think that black solved his problems here, and we can play against the double pawns later on the long run. Here white should be precise. Probably it's still fine for white. I would go f4 or something, but in all the games in the database, white continued e4, and he was immediately worse after e5. Let's go back. Knight b1 is not an ambitious move, and it offers a repetition. It's still playable. Of course, we can go back knight f6 if we want to, but we may as well continue with c6, covering the long diagonal. Now let's see knight h4. If white goes castle, castle is possible, but it's very slow, and we can go d5. And now the knight on e4 is reinforced, and black is doing fine. I mean, we just gained some tempi. White played knight c3, knight b1, and didn't get anything in return. So knight h4, but now the bishop cannot move because the knight is under attack. We go queen b6. We need to act quickly. For now, d4 is attacked. There is also a threat of queen b4 check. Knight takes f5. I think sooner or later white has to take the bishop. Pawn takes. White defends the d4 pawn. Of course, this is really important pawn, so he's defending it, but now we can go queen b4 and we're going to grab some material. Knight c3. White sacrifices a pawn, but he wants to get the b file open. Knight c3, bc3, queen c3. We just started taking pawns. This one goes with check, and the next one is c4, bishop d2, and queen c4. We're 2 pawns up, but white has a good compensation due to the bishop pair and the open files. So we still need to be very careful here. It's good to analyze this position a bit more. Let's say queen b1 with the double attack, 1 b7 and f5. We need to defend b7. Let's say queen a6, bishop f1, b5, queen f5, e6, queen f4, and queen h3. Well, the queen is a bit exposed on a3, but there is no good way for white to attack it further. It's the position is extremely complex and complicated. We are a pawn up. White has compensation. With bishop f1, white forced us some weaknesses on the queen side, but now it's not so easy to castle. This is a new position. It can be analyzed further. There are plenty of possibilities for both sides here. So this was knight b1. Now let's see knight d5. If white wants to avoid this knight trade, the knight may as well jump in the center. Now white wants to go knight h4, but also knight e3. So this makes sense. Of course, it's very easy for us to attack this knight with c6. We do it, and at the same time, we're closing the long diagonal. Knight e3. White is attacking our bishop. And we can play bishop e6. We choose this square for the bishop because the bishop is more active here. And we want to leave d7 for the knight. Castle, castle. Let's say queen c2. This is quite a weird configuration. It's probably not bad to have this knights on f3 and e3. And still white needs to do something about the bishop on c1. Okay, for now there is a threat on the knight on e4. Let's say we try to keep the game more complicated with f5. There is also d5 here, which is a solid alternative, but then the position is rather symmetrical. So f5, b3. As I was saying, white needs to do something about the dark square bishop, and there he goes. He wants to fianchetto it. We finish the development with knight d7, bishop b2, and then knight df6. Reinforcing the knight on e4, which is very active, and we got a Dutch type position. Here a5 could be a useful move. Again, I like this idea to gain some more space on the queen side. This was played by Anish Giri in Title Tuesday in a game, and he won it. But okay, it's look at the position. All the pieces are on the board. It's a quite unusual position because of this knight on e3. All the results are possible here. Now let's see knight h4, which is trying to force the issue. This is an ambitious move. We take on c3. We're forced to do this, but we like this move anyway because now we doubled white's pawns. Bishop c8. We had to go back because b7 was hanging, so now it's defended. White has a lead in development here, but pawn structure is compromised. Castle. If rook b1, then after knight d7, it will transpose. So castle, castle. And now we're going to see rook b1, e4, and f4. Rook b1 is, of course, a move that makes sense. Since the b file is open, why not take control of it right away? And there is a threat on b7. Of course, this was played most often in practice, because who doesn't want to activate the rook? And here we go knight d7, developing the knight. And here we have a slow plan to go rook b8, b6, and so on. Then bishop b7 or bishop a6 to develop the light squared bishop. And in some cases, the knight can jump to f6 to defend our king if necessary. Of course, white cannot take on b7 because we take bishop b7, rook b7, and knight b6. And rook on b7 is trapped. We're going to collect it later on. So white, let's say white starts the play on the king side with f4. Our plan is low, and we just continue it. Now b6 is there. Let's say white is ambitious and takes full control over the center. If f5, okay, look, after f5, we never want to take on f5 because then the knight would come there. But our bishop on c8 is restricted now. So that's why this plan with b6 comes handy to just solve the bishop, to develop it to b7 or a6. So basically a6 is probably more interesting, and then to follow up with c5 and attack the c4 pawn. e4, and here we can exploit the weakness on c4 with knight b6. Let's say white goes queen d3 to defend it, the most reasonable move. Bishop e6, this is the point of our previous move. We're forcing white to push d5. White goes for d5. And now bishop d7 just to keep the bishop developed. And once white push d5, the central pawns are not so flexible. And we have the idea to go c7, c6, queen c7, rook b c8, and target the pawns on the c file. White will have to do something dynamically to compensate for the pawn weaknesses, so that's why black's play is much easier. White has to create something. e4 looks very natural, but it's actually an inaccurate move, because now this bishop on g2 is shut off, and this gives us time to attack the center more quickly. c5, the idea is to follow up with knight c6. Bishop e3, white is defending on d4, developing some pieces, but white's problem is that he's lacking a clear plan, whereas we have these targets here. Knight c6 is very natural, and black is already preferable here, since we can attack the c4 pawn with knight a5, or maybe queen a5, queen a6, and target the pawn. And meanwhile, white has to defend here. So the critical move in the position is f4. White has to do something quickly to justify the double pawns. And the idea is to follow up with f5, open up the f5. Like this, white is keeping the light squared bishop open, and also he's trying to justify this knight on h4. And here we're offering this interesting novelty, knight d7. This makes a lot of sense. Again, the slow plan with rook b8, b6. Again, the surprise effect, your opponent will certainly not expect this. The knight on d7 can also jump to f6 to defend the king. And this is an important feature, because after f5, our king can be weak. I have to mention that c5 is the main move here. Probably if your opponent goes for this, you will expect c5. Just to mention the dangers in the position. So white goes on with f5, and now the game Opar in Caruana, blitz game played in Warsaw 2021, continued with knight c6, bishop e3 to defend on d4. And here black was in a hurry to attack on c4, but this was just wrong, because after queen d3, white not only defends on c4, but now there are threats on g6, and black is not developed. Bishop d7. In here, okay, white missed his chance and black went on to win, but white could have just taken on g6. Let's say fg6 and knight g6 with a winning position. This is exactly what we need to avoid. Notice that the knight on a5 is completely misplaced in this instance and is not helping the king. The king on g8 feels quite lonely. And that's why this works. Knight d7. If necessary, we can bring the knight to f6. Okay, now the logical follow-up for white is to go f5. And white is trying to create some threats on our king before we coordinate our pieces. And here we play e6 to immediately challenge this pawn on f5. See what white is going to do about it. Now white has to take a decision. Let's say f takes e6. This is the most logical. There is also e4 there, shutting off the bishop. But then we can continue with our slow plan. I like this plan. Just rook b8, b6, and so on to take the light squared bishop out. F takes e6 happens. Pawn takes. Rook takes f8. White trades a pair of rooks just to bring hoping to bring the other one to f1 and get control over the f file. The best recapture here is with the queen. And okay, this is a new position. White has some development lead, but let's not forget the double pawns, which can be an asset for us on the long term. We have ideas to attack these pawns with knight b6, queen e8, just to get the queen out of the file, and c6 to shut off the light squared bishop. But of course, it depends how white continues right now. Also, it's important to stop white's threats because white has some leading development and he could try to create some threats. Just to give you an idea, if queen b3, for example, we can go a5 here. And this is fine. Or bishop g5 is another move. We can go queen e8. And then follow up with the plans mentioned before. Again, it's a new position, and white has to prove something. White has to, because of the double pawns, and if we have time to consolidate, I think black will take over here. So just to recap, these were the lines with Fianchetto against the King's Indian. I talked about them with, we've seen g3 immediately with the lines where white tries to postpone the move knight c3. We go bishop g7, bishop g2, and here it's important to, if you want to go for this plan with bishop f5, it's important to include bishop f5 now, before white has time to play knight c3. Then castle, castle, knight h4, bishop e4, and so on. And black has a good position. And then there is the other one where knight c3, bishop g7, and white goes g3. So all these lines where white includes the knight on c3. Again, bishop f5. We need to do this before castling, before white has time to go bishop g2. Bishop g2, knight e4, and here I covered all the possible logical moves. The most ambitious is knight h4. When we double the pawns, bishop falls back to c8. And after f4, there is this move knight d7. a novelty. You're going to surprise your opponent. And there is this slow but efficient plan with rook b8, b6, and so on. Well, I hope you're going to use this system in practice, and there will be more over-the-board games or online games with it. And bishop f5 system against the Fianchetto will become more and more popular. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.